The icy, rust-colored water was a living predator, its claws already tearing at Liam's chest, stealing his warmth with a brutal efficiency. He felt the immense, unyielding weight of the fallen tree pinning his leg, a dead giant holding him hostage in the rapidly flooding ravine. Each desperate cry for help was instantly devoured by the thunderous roar of the current, a symphony of destruction that echoed off the canyon walls. Across the impassable chasm, his fellow rangers were nothing more than frantic, helpless silhouettes against a bruised and stormy sky. Their gestures of encouragement were futile, their shouts lost to the wind. Trapped between the crushing weight of the log and the suffocating embrace of the rising water, Liam felt a profound, chilling loneliness settle in, a final acceptance of his fate. From their vantage point, the rescue team felt a paralysis born of pure impotence. They could see the white foam churning around their friend, the way his head struggled to stay above the surface as debris slammed into him. Every instinct screamed at them to act, to rappel down, to do something, but the chasm was too wide, the current too violent. It was a death trap, and they were forced to be its audience. The fading twilight painted the scene in grim, desperate hues, transforming the familiar landscape into a hostile alien world. Their hope dwindled with the light, replaced by a cold, hard knot of grief in their stomachs as they watched the inevitable unfold, powerless to intervene in nature's cruel judgment. It was then that a colossal shadow detached itself from the deepening gloom of the jungle's edge. It moved with a deliberate, ground-shaking grace that defied its sheer size. This was no man, no rescue they had called for. It was Kale, the troop's dominant silverback, a magnificent creature of myth and legend within the preserve. His dark form was a stark silhouette against the storm, his presence radiating an ancient and formidable power. He stopped at the edge of the torrent, his massive head turning slowly, his dark, intelligent eyes surveying the chaos with an unnerving, unreadable calm. To the horrified rangers, he was not a potential savior. He was the final, terrifying omen of the end. Liam saw him too. Through the stinging spray and the haze of encroaching hypothermia, the gorilla's form was both terrifying and surreal. A primal fear, cold and sharp, shot through him, a fear of the wild in its most potent form. He could feel the gorilla's gaze on him, an intense, focused observation that seemed to cut through the noise and the panic. Kale took a step, then another, moving not away from the danger, but directly toward the churning water's edge where Liam was trapped. The man's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the roar of the flood. Was this the end? Had the jungle sent its king to witness his demise? What happened next defied all logic and every known law of the wild. But to understand what was about to happen, we need to go back. Months earlier, their extraordinary connection was forged, not with words, but in a moment of shared vulnerability deep within the jungle's green heart. Liam, then a fresh-faced biologist charting primate territories, had stumbled upon a scene of quiet desperation. A much younger Kale, not yet the undisputed king of his troop, was caught fast in a poacher's crude wire snare. The metal bit mercilessly into his powerful ankle, a cold, unyielding manacle. From Kale's perspective, the world had shrunk to this agonizing point of pain and the terrifying scent of the approaching human. He braced for a final, violent confrontation, his muscles coiled with a mixture of raw power and profound fear, a captive sovereign facing his potential executioner. Instead of aggression, Liam offered an almost reverent stillness. He saw past the bared teeth and the intimidating size to the intelligent, terrified eyes within. He recognized the trap's brutal design and knew any sudden movement would be perceived as a threat, so he sat. For hours, just beyond the gorilla's reach, he spoke in a low, calm monotone, narrating the rustling leaves, the distant bird calls, anything to fill the tense air with a frequency of peace. Liam felt the animal's fear as a palpable force, a wall he had to dismantle brick by brick with patience. He wasn't just a scientist observing a subject. He was one living being communicating with another, trying to convey a single, vital message. I am not here to harm you. Kale watched, his powerful mind processing this bizarre encounter. This human was different. He didn't carry the long, loud sticks of the hunters. He didn't shout or advance with predatory intent. His voice was a steady, rhythmic hum that slowly began to soothe the frantic pounding in the gorilla's chest. The animal's immense strength, exhausted from fighting the snare, began to wane, replaced by a weary curiosity. He could feel the human's intent not through words, but through an aura of profound calm. In a moment of sheer desperation and burgeoning trust, Cale stopped struggling, lowered his head slightly, and watched as the man began to inch forward, a tool gleaming in his hand. It was a surrender born of instinct, a gamble on an unproven compassion. The final moments were a study in silent negotiation. Liam held up the wire cutters, letting Cale see them, understand them as the key to his freedom. He moved with a slow, deliberate grace, his heart hammering with a mix of adrenaline and awe. The metallic snap as the wire parted was sharp and final. For a breathless second, they remained frozen. Cale carefully withdrew his wounded leg, rose to his full, magnificent height, and turned. He didn't flee. He held Liam's gaze for a long, unblinking moment. It was a look of profound, ancient understanding, an acknowledgement that transcended species. Then he was gone, vanishing into the emerald shadows. A silent debt was left hanging in the air, a bond forged in pain and sealed with an act of quiet mercy. Back in the raging present, the situation had deteriorated into a nightmare. The water was no longer just rising. It was a furious, churning beast, a liquid avalanche of mud, uprooted saplings, and sharp-edged rocks. It battered Liam relentlessly, each wave a concussive blow that stole more of his precious body heat. Hypothermia's insidious tendrils were wrapping around his mind, making his thoughts slow and syrupy. His calls for help had long since faded, his throat raw, and his voice now just a ragged whisper that the storm greedily consumed. He could feel the life being hammered out of him, his consciousness flickering like a candle in a hurricane, on the verge of being extinguished forever. The cold was an internal enemy now, working from the inside out. Across the chasm, the Rangers' hope had curdled into a sickening, impotent grief. They watched as Liam's head, once held high in defiance, now struggled to break the surface after each successive wave. The sheer force of the current made any rescue attempt suicidal. Their high tensile ropes and advanced gear were rendered utterly useless against the raw, unbridled power of nature's fury. They were highly trained professionals, reduced to horrified spectators at their friend's execution. One of the younger Rangers turned away, unable to bear the sight, his face a mask of anguish. They weren't just losing a colleague. They were witnessing the stark, brutal reality of their own powerlessness in the face of the wild they had sworn to protect. From his position at the water's edge, Cale remained a statue of immense, coiled power. His senses, far more acute than any human's, were processing a symphony of chaos. He could feel the tremor of the collapsing earth through the soles of his feet and smell the sharp, metallic tang of fear in the air, distinct from the scent of wet earth and rain. He observed the struggling man not with malice, but with a profound, analytical focus. The small, fragile creature was losing its fight. The loud, frantic gestures of the other humans across the water were meaningless distractions. For Cale, the world had narrowed to two elements, the unstoppable force of the flood and the fading life force of the man trapped within its grip. Inside Liam's fading consciousness, the world was becoming a muffled, blurry dream. The crushing pain in his leg had subsided into a dull, distant throb, a signal from a part of his body that no longer felt like his own. His vision tunneled, the faces of his friends across the ravine blurring into indistinct smudges of color. He saw the gorilla, Cale, standing impassively, a dark mountain of fur and muscle against the gray sky. He felt no fear of the animal now, only a strange, final sense of awe. The jungle had sent its king to preside over his end. He felt a wave of acceptance wash over him, a cold peace that was even more terrifying than the panic it replaced. His fight was over. Suddenly, a sickening groan echoed from upstream, louder than the roar of the water. A huge chunk of the ravine wall, undermined by the deluge, gave way, collapsing into the torrent. This sent a new, monstrous surge of water, a tidal wave of debris and liquid force, charging down the narrow canyon. The Rangers screamed a useless warning as the wave bore down on Liam's position. It was a final, undeniable death sentence. The log pinning him shifted violently, the pressure on his leg becoming an excruciating, bone-splintering agony. The water, once at his chest, was now engulfing his shoulders, clawing for his throat. There was no escape. The world was ending. The new wave hit with the force of a freight train. Liam was completely submerged, his world exploding into a silent, churning vortex of brown and black. The Rangers let out a collective cry of despair, their last sliver of hope obliterated in an instant. They were certain it was over.